everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm so glad that everyone has joined us tonight for part two. Uh, just to start with an introduction of myself, my name is Sarah Salto, and I'm a museum educator with the Dunn Museum of Lake County, part of the Lake County Forest Reserves. Again, we're so happy to have you here for part two of Lake County History Symposium. If this is your first time attending, if you weren't able to attend last week, you're still welcome to enjoy. But just as kind of a recap from last week, we talked about the importance of local history and why it really matters, and got to hear some stories of unexpected surprises and mysteries and ways that historians today have uncovered these mysteries through looking at archival materials and newspapers and records. So this week, we're going to continue our theme, historical surprises, when research reveals the unexpected. And again, we're reflecting on the history of our area by looking at the work of local historians and how they find unexpected truths and fuller stories through continued research. In this final night of the program, we have 3 new presentations. So last week we had our keynote and then the 2 additional presentations. Now we have 3 new presentations. We will take a behind-the-scenes look at personal papers of Waukegan-born author Ray Bradbury. We'll separate the myth from history in the community of Half Day and reveal unexpected connections between 2 forgotten cookbooks. And I'm really excited to hear these new stories and hope you connect to these just as much as you did last week. And again, are reflecting on why this all matters to our area today. For those of you who are not familiar with the Dunn Museum, I would just like to encourage you to come visit and learn more about the museum. We are located in Libertyville, and we feature permanent exhibits from Lake County's history all the way from prehistoric times to present day. So this evening's program is free and is sponsored by USG. And we're really grateful for USG as they sponsor free programs on Thursday evenings for the museum. And they also apply free admission to the Dunn Museum every Thursday from 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock. So come visit us on a Thursday when we are free. That's a great time to come see our exhibits. As a next part to officially start our program, I would just want to take a moment to thank the Lake County Historic Alliance for the help in coordinating the symposium and the work they do year-round to emphasize the importance of local history. We're so lucky to have so many museums and historical societies that focus on building community and conducting active research. So this is especially critical to highlight these local historical alliances as we are commemorating the 250th anniversary signing of the Declaration of Independence. So throughout this whole year, be looking out for your historical alliances as we are all going to be taking a closer look at lesser known stories that shaped our community. So it doesn't mean that, the Revolution and the Declaration of Independence did not happen here, but that doesn't mean we can't take this opportunity to really look at our past and how the past has influenced our present day and where we've gotten. All right. So the other thing just to quickly mention is that there is a program if you want to follow along with the upcoming presenters and links to their organizations. Nicole did put in the chat the program, and it also was emailed to you. Okay, so I'm going to bring on our first presenters for the evening. The first presentation is On the Ridge, 2 Community Cookbooks, Join 2 Communities by Kathy Lambrecht and Nancy Webster. Catherine Lambrecht is a culinary historian at her initiative at the Highland Park Historical Society. She's been collecting and documenting Highland Park's community cookbooks. Nancy Webster, the other half of the presentation tonight, is an archivist, curator, and adjunct professor of archivy at Dominican University. She studied at the University of Michigan and attended Marseille University for 1 year. Currently, Webster manages historical collections at the Highland Park Historical Society, where she established a community archives program, the Highland Park Archives, and local history collections, with funding from the National Historic Preservation and Records Commission. She wrote and managed state and local grants, expanding digital access via the Illinois Digital Archive and Digital Library of America, bringing together multiple agencies. Her previous archival work included the University of Michigan's Bentley Historical Library and the Chicago History Museums and Mullets Connector Corporation. So thank you, Kathy and Nancy, for being here today, and I'm going to turn it over to you to start your presentation.
Okay, so along the ridge, two community cookbooks join two communities.
Okay, so the community cookbook collection actually started a couple decades ago. It was started by Leah Axelrod, former president of the Historical Society. That's her with the phone. Another former president, Carl Baer, and she received an award from the city for that when she established a community Victorian kitchen with some early community cookbooks. And then we discovered more, of course. And next slide. The community cookbook era kind of started, or initiative started with the Civil War with some local cookbooks. The first evidence we have of Highland Park women contributing to cooks were larger cookbooks for Society for the Friendless and other social programs in Chicago. These two are the two we've talked most about because of the role they played in women going out to the public sphere and funding first the Asoli Club, the first women's club in Highland Park, the first public beach in Highland Park, and the Highland Park Women's Club, founded in the first independent women's club, founded in 1899, to raise money for their house, which is now the community house in Highland Park. Next slide. So, and there you can see the Solely, an article in Social Service Review about the establishment of the social club. Now, Highland Park, the West Ridge School was founded in 1899 on the west side of Highland Park. And Kathy's going to talk a little bit about some interesting discoveries while she was working with the Highland Park Women's Club cookbook.
Okay, so I had promised to do a presentation about the Asoli cookbook, but a week before, Nancy located the Highland Park Women's Club cookbook from 1925. It had never been documented. It was in our collection, but it was not yet processed. So I quickly processed it. I scanned it. I created an index on a pretty short time. Well, there was a woman who walked past me and she goes, "What are you doing?" I explained. And she goes, "Are there any recipes for my grandmother?" I said, "Well, the book's 1925." And she goes, "Well, she died in 1928. I said, "You know what? When I finish indexing it, I will let you know." Well, it turns out Grandma was a pretty significant person in the sense that she was voted onto the school board before she could ever vote for herself. And in fact, when she did die in about 1928, but 1929, this clock was put up in her honor at Lincoln School. It's now at Ravinia School in Highland Park. These were the recipes that I located exactly from her grandmother. And it was really quite thrilling. It also told me there's more to this community cookbook in the sense of I live in this community, obviously she lives in this community, but you start to see names and people that you know or knew of. And to put a bookmark on all this, or not, I should say a bookend on all this, her granddaughter, Mary Seyfarth, she she designed and they uploaded this weather vane at Ravinia School just this autumn. And can you imagine both the grandmother and the granddaughter each have made a at least an artistic contribution indirectly or directly. So I was pretty thrilled about that. All right, Nancy, this is you.
So we talk about along the ridge, and both Park Ridge, the town which is south of us in Cook County, and early farming communities in Highland Park are along the ridge. And that was a travel path for animals, for Native Americans, for new families coming. It was carved out by glaciation, and it became part of the United States in 1833 when the current residents of Potawatomi ceded the land to the United States of America. And then it became the township of Deerfield, later renamed Moraine because of lots of confusion. Next slide, please.
Huh?
Now, the area we're talking about, this is Moraine Township now, and you can see Highland Park's boundary was like a fraction of what it is now. Nevertheless, when the area became part of the United States, There was the train station, there was the Ravinia Village, there was Highland Park, but most of the people were settling in farms up until the platted town in 1869 around Deerfield. And when the kids went to school, they went all the way to Ravinia. And that's why they um, opened the school in 1899 finally. Now, we have much less documentation of these people in farms. We have some pictures, we have some anecdotes, but not to the depth or extent of the documentation of that smaller area east of the tracks about clubs and churches and schools. But so when we discovered these cookbooks, I was quite pleased. I knew there'd been a group called the Westridge Community Club. I did not know much outside of ephemeral notices of their activities. We don't have their minutes, we don't have newsletters, we don't have photos. So to find this representation of this cookbook and the work of the people to make Westridge School a community center, which was part of this auditorium, and their work in the broader scope of women's clubs and social activities. And if we could do the next slide, it's a representation of the farms that could be found, and this is the late 19th century after they've been abandoned, that could be found along the ridge and the area that became part of Highland Park. It was officially incorporated into Highland Park in 1924, although in the vernacular, people often refer to themselves as being from Highland Park. But it was we just don't have that much enough information about them. And these cookbooks tell you what they ate, tells you who wrote, and they told you what their interests were. So next slide, please.
Okay, and this is the book that Nancy's referring to. I found this by hunting around the internet. And it's from the West Ridge Community Club of Highland Park, which Nancy was really quite interested in because she, as she just pointed out, had very little information about this group or any documentation. And their project for this book was to build this, auditorium. It happens that we were there just this last weekend. It also happens that Mary Seyfarth, her grandfather designed this auditorium. This was in the 1930s. And this building, this auditorium was attached in one form or another to the one-room school. Maybe, Nancy, you want to embellish upon that?
Well, they did open the one-room school so the poor kids didn't have to schlep across the slough, several miles just to go to school, or dad or mom had to take time in the farm wagon to take them to school. But when they added the auditorium, the school had been growing, and the auditorium, much like the village house at Ravinia School, was kind of a community center. And that was, I'm sure, one of the reasons why, the Westridge School encouraged it, and it was well used for plays and other groups and meetings, bazaars, all kinds of things, making the school a center of the community. In District 108, which is not part of a larger 112 district. Next slide, please.
Okay, so this is a representative page from the book from Highland Park. Of course, there's the handwritten note. There were advertisements throughout. And in fact, I kept a separate list of just who the advertisers were. And then each recipe present here has an attribution to somebody and the community they came from. Yeah, Highland Park, but they were also like from Iowa and Missouri, which was sort of surprising, but we'll find out. This on the list on the left, I'm sorry, it's not easy to read. I should have thought about that. But this list on the left is just a partial group of those who contributed recipes. There were several hundred recipes. This was the format that the recipes usually came in. And let me see, where are we? I'm lost. Yeah. So I think I went too far. Sorry. But this is the book that was found several months later while doing a search on the internet. But this wasn't the Park Ridge, it was for the Park Ridge School for Girls in Park Ridge, Illinois. The copyright was to 1935 to the West Ridge Community Club of Highland Park. And this was the project here wasn't like with Highland Park, but this was to provide homeless girls with a background of care and home life to give her a school home which merits her pride and loyalty, and to give her adequate training so that she may eventually become independent. Nancy, you wanted to comment about who endorsed this
Well,
book?
yeah, if you notice in the bottom, of course, it's endorsed by the Chicago Association of Subscription Investigation Committee. That was similar to we have GuideStar and other guides about what's a good charitable foundation. This organization was an offshoot of the Chicago Chamber of Commerce that gave its stamp of approval on what they considered legitimate fundraising. So that was kind of, that's a boost to give that information.
So this is a page in the Park Ridge book. There's no attribution, but here's a book from the Highland Park book. It's the same content, it's the same order, but there's no attribution. Now, Nancy did find there were a few pages where maybe they made a mistake and the attribution was still kept, or they made minor changes, but largely these books are like identical, except of course whom they advertised, and of course the opening notes talking about where the money's going. I did index this book like I index pretty much all the books that we get, and you'll see there's a section in gray. Well, the section in white is what was in the Park Ridge book. The section in gray indicates who the contributor was and their location, and it's in gray because it doesn't exist in the book uh, from Park Ridge. Now, this is the project that they were funding or working with. This has been going on for some years. In fact, I was rereading an article this morning, and this has its roots sort of in the women's club movement and in the Civil War, because a woman accompanied her husband, a military officer, to Cairo, Illinois, and was surprised by all these children that were homeless. And this sort of became her mission. Anyway, this is a beautiful piece of property. So they bought something like 60 acres for $8,000 in 1906. In 1908, they began to build this project. What remains today is just that front end. So this Solomon Cottage, uh, that is where the Park Ridge Historical Society is housed. I This is like the building in the middle, I think is related to the Park District, and then this building, Buck Hall, is mothballed for whatever future plan they may have for it. The Park Ridge Historical Society did have a model of how these buildings were used. Now, the Solomon was the intake building. So it may not be exactly alike, but it's the building that they're housed in. It was the building that they could draft a model. And this was also funded by Julius Rosenwald, correct? I'm always
Correct.
worried I'm going to mess his name up. Sorry about that.
So Mr. Rosenwald, known for his African American schools in the South, was the primary original funder of the what became the Park Ridge for School for Girls. He funded the Solomon Cottage in honor of Mrs. Hannah Solomon, who led the school for many years. She was a key figure in the Women's Club. And one thing we notice when we not only look at the recipes, which came not only from people in the Ridge neighborhood, people from a district one away from farther east, but women around the country. We don't know if they're cousins. But because Mrs. Solomon and another former director, Ellen Henrotin, they both have Wikipedia entries, talked so much about their endeavors, it could have spread through the network of women's clubs or otherwise. We do know also that in addition to contributing recipes for this fundraising book for the Park Ridge School for Girls, every women's club, from the music club to Ravinia Women's Club to the Soli Club, contributed somehow to this effort in Park Ridge, which helped train women to be part of the women's economy, especially the women's economy, to learn to sew and make hats and instruct so they could go out and make a living in a safer environment. But from individual dance studio owners and art teachers all gave lessons for free, contributions, and really contributed to this movement of giving women a way to make a living and participating in the women's economy and entering the public sphere.
And we followed all these different little news clippings that kind of affirmed some of the things there was. And one of the things, so Mr. Rosenwald contributed to the Solomon House, but some of these other cottages, and this whole idea of cottages where there's a small group of girls and a mother figure, this was apparently new at that time. Uh, but there were different cottages, like there was the Tuttle Cottage in Park Ridge. This was donated, it was a gift of William Tuttle, who, in the memory of his daughter Florence. But the Chicago Women's Club cottage, not only did they donate the funds to build it, they also did ongoing contributions toward its maintenance and care, uh, which is, phenomenal. Do you have any more comments on that, Nancy? Okay. So all of these books, including the books we're subject today, I document their presence on the Sifter, which is sort of an international um, catalog of cookbooks. Community cookbooks are present, but not very present. But they're also the books that get through the cracks because there's no ISBN number, there's no formal publisher. They're made often in small quantities, so they printed 250 copies and then passed it on. I put an emphasis on the community cookbooks because they're the thing that a researcher may not know exists. By simply mentioning it, they now know at least where to go looking for it. And so, like with Highland Park, we have a number of community cookbooks that deal with Judaica. And for somebody who's doing research on Judaica, this is a great location to kind of put some effort into. So this is the type of information, the author, the title, the publication year. There's way more details, but it's totally worth it because the book goes from unknown or known to so few and then unknown and then becomes known to many. So, Nancy, sorry. And this is the DPLA. Now, you want to talk about that for a moment? I shut it down, or you want to go straight to your computer?
I'm getting a thing to share request to share, so I'm going to share my screen too now.
Okie doke.
And tell you a little bit. So when these materials come into collections, whether it be archives, a historical site, or wherever, what do we want to do with them? We want to preserve and make them accessible. And so in order to do that, let me go back to Zoom. We describe them so people can find them. And if you go to our website, you'll see that drop down. You can see the cookbooks, you can see digital, so you can see Highland Park Archives and Local History Collections. And I have it already open so that in case it was too slow, because sometimes the computer gets slow. And we describe the book so people know we have them. And you can see who wrote it, and you can search in all webs back with the author. You can see other materials made by the same authors too, the same title, but slightly different. And also, we put in the records, the link to the cat. We've been lucky in the Highland Park to have several large grants for digitization. We didn't have it for this, but we had Kathy's volunteer time, and then I did the text recognition. These two books the type is very clear and crisp, making the character recognition to put into text very, very easy. It was it was the easiest OCR task I ever did. And we put them on the Digital Library of America. We do that through the Illinois Digital Archive. And because of text limitations, and in both the description, the catalog record, and the text contents, we divide it up into chapters. So you can go just access it through our website, through DPLA, through the IDA. And within that, you can search and spread out and find the different chapters and recipes. And that's what we want to do, of course, as archivists. We want to make it accessible. We don't want only people using them. We want to preserve it in our collections and make it accessible through digitization and collection and activities like this. Any questions?
I just wanted to add again, because this whole idea that this was linked to the women's community cookbooks and women's clubs and this whole project, I'm sorry, Nancy may have thought about it before, but I didn't really glom onto this until today.
Well, yeah, absolutely. The cookbooks were very much a way where women entered the public sphere, bringing I would kind of say, bringing the hearth to the public sphere. They took their kitchen and used it as a way to raise money and thereby documenting their own homes. And we can say what ingredients they worked with. We can see what activities they invested in. And although, cookbooks now, community cookbooks, you might find entries and man organization and mixed organization. But in the 19th century and early 20th century, these were largely driven by women's part of the first and second waves of women's entering the public sphere. And the first known community cookbooks were written by women in the Civil War for the Sanitary Commission, as I'm sure you've heard many times before. And it worked, and people still make them for churches and schools and lists of other organizations.
By the way, I see that Pat said built in 1908. She's correct. If I said something else, it was a slip of the tongue.
I think someone asked a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
1908, yes, the Park Ridge School for Girls is actually originally in Evanston, and they built up these cottages on the land that was in Park Ridge at that time, of course.
And back then, that was the wilderness in the sense it was just open area, not surrounded by subdivisions like it is today. By the way, it's worth going to visit this place. It just gives you quite an impression just showing up and seeing it for yourself.
Any
right.
questions?
Yeah, thank you for the
We were too thorough,
presentation and
Nancy.
going back and forth. It was great to hear both sides of what you guys were sharing and covering and hearing the mysteries behind these two cookbooks and like Kathy just mentioned and Nancy just mentioned too, just how it connects to a larger picture with women's movements and finding roles for women. We've gotten quite a few questions here. Some of them I had to, but let's start with a fun one here. Someone asked, have you made any of the recipes? Are there any favorites? And my question kind of went off that too is, are these recipes really indicative of the time period? Like, were these popular things people would be making in, the 20s, the 30s?
Absolutely.
Kathy might be able to answer those.
First of all, no, I've not made them. I'm not much of a cook or baker experimenter on that. I think they're very representative, yes, of what's popular at the time, what people are making for their homes, because usually when they're soliciting, they say, "What do you share your favorite recipe?" That's the selling thing. It always has been. What's your specialty? What do you make? What do you like? And I
Mm-hmm.
think that they are indicative of that geographic area, of that social group, of that time, what people are eating and what ingredients they're using.
And there were a
Anyway,
couple of surprises. I found
Ooh,
basically a recipe for tuna noodle casserole, which I kind of thought was one of those 1950s dishes. No, it goes
yeah.
back to the late 1920s. I also found a recipe, it had a different name, and sorry, I don't recall what it was, but for s'mores. That
Oh,
chocolate graham
I
cracker
saw that one too,
marshmallow
yeah.
thing.
But it's not called s'mores. And that contribution was by one of the Westridge teachers, by the way.
It was what?
The one I think was Blythe. It was one of the teachers. I do know that. I remember that. One of the teachers put the pre-s'mores recipe.
And very nicely, when Nancy put this up on the digital library, she did put a list of of the recipes contributed. I mean, not the recipes, but the people who contributed.
Not to
So if
share.
you were
mm-hmm.
hunting for them,
Mm-hmm.
um, I thought that was great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was kind of gonna be one of the questions that I had. So, you think of cookbooks as a way to do research to find out more about the food during the time period and the not just like the recipes, but the ingredients and the amounts. But what are some other ways you can use cookbooks as
Well,
research?
actually, going back to the ingredients, the Soli cookbook from 1911 and the Highland Park Women's Club from 1925 had vastly different. There was a lot more canned foods in the 1925 book. There was a lot more use. There was Crisco mentioned. There was no mention of
Mhm.
Crisco in 1911. Um, yeah, there's all sorts. And in addition, there had been a war in between. And the
Yeah,
war encouraged people to use canned goods so that you could quickly pour into something, create a dinner, and get back to working for the home front.
yeah.
So
And
I'm
as you
sorry
get
if
later
I,
to, through the Great Depression, I'm sure some of that infected recipes and ingredients too.
and I have a theory, but I haven't gone far enough to really investigate it. But I think when it comes to the recipes that are known as from the Depression, I think they're older than 1930s. I think they go back to pioneer days. Because there you really were living with scarcity that was like, what can you do? There's nothing. You
Hmm.
got to figure it out. So anyway, because I
So
see a lot of
someone,
things
this is,
attributed to the Depression, and I'm not sure.
yes, definitely. This is more of a archival question too, but do you have any suggestions on digitizing handwriting?
Well, there's a couple experimental programs that are available now. And it's you're what of course, what you're doing is you're taking a photograph and trying to read it. And with AI and with some of the newer sophisticated programs, it's much more accurate than it was. And there's several online programs that are free that do it quite well. The one free one that answers because a subscription to a high level, we use OCR.best, and a couple professors at I think University of Kentucky have been working on much more sophisticated multilingual handwriting reading. And I'll add that, I'll find that link and put it in the chat because that's the most sophisticated handwriting recognition um, so program that I've seen, and that's also free. So there you go. You still got to
Neat.
do a little work though. You still have to proof it. It is
Yeah,
because you get some really funny stuff if you don't.
You have to
great.
proof
Well,
it every time, no matter what you use.
yes, yep, definitely. Well, thank you so much for sharing your community cookbooks and making this local history connection. There's someone else in the chat just commenting how important it is to get local histories to highlight these cookbooks and making sure that they get part of the collections too. So I know Nancy and Kathy are definitely on that wavelength too. Um,
Well, culinary
so
history
feel
is
free to
really
make your comments in the chat too.
okay. But I do think culinary history is coming into its own now. It's really being recognized and being used and being more less looked at as like, oh, isn't that cute, as to this really is a piece of our history locally and nationally.
Yes, definitely. Um,
Well, we move on
all
to the
right.
next topic. Thank you. It was
Yeah,
fun.
thank you. And Kathy and Nancy will be back at the end if you want to have more questions for them later on too. So we will bring on our next presenter. We will bring on Ty, and I'm just switching up my screen here and removing the spotlights. But our next presentation is A Year in the Life of Ray Bradbury, Discoveries from his 1981 Daybook, and other fun pieces from his private collection with Ty Rohrer. Ty Rohrer is the manager of cultural arts for the Waukegan Park District and oversees the Waukegan History Museum at the Carnegie Haynes House Museum, Jack Benny Center of the Arts, and the Waukegan Symphony Orchestra and Concert Chorus. In his capacity with the Park District, he works on behalf of Waukegan's history as a liaison and historian with the Waukegan Historical Society. He received Bachelor of Arts degrees in both history and anthropology from the University of Illinois. He obtained a Master of Arts in History from the University of Illinois Springfield. So thank you, Ty, for joining here today. And I am going to be turning it over to you. I can't wait to hear more about Ray Bradbury. Such a hot topic right now.
That's right. Thank you, Sarah. Well, good evening, everyone. It is a pleasure to be with you all and again present for the Lake County History Symposium. I am coming to you this evening from the Waukegan History Museum at the Carnegie. And for tonight's presentation, I am in the room aptly named the Ray Bradbury Library. Ray Bradbury was born in Waukegan in 1920. His formative years growing up in Waukegan were spent playing in the ravines, going to the movie theaters, attending carnivals, and of course, coming to the library that I am in tonight. All of these things, as well as his influences by his family, helped prep his mind in the realm of fantasy and to one day become Ray Bradbury, the author, screenwriter, poet, and so much more. The Waukegan Carnegie Library was an integral part to his childhood. In 2009, Ray wrote an introduction to the Waukegan Historical Society's publication titled Waukegan: A History. This was written by city historian Ed Link. And Bradbury wrote, I was born in Waukegan in 1920 and had my second birth at the Carnegie Library in Waukegan. I came to full bloom there, and when I was 12, after reading most of the books in that fantastic library, I became Ray Bradbury. What more could I ask? What a wonderful town to be born in. What a library to grow in. What a town to come back to, a town that I know and love with all my heart. Today, Ray's childhood library has been restored and transformed into the Waukegan History Museum at the Carnegie. This award-winning project was accomplished by the Waukegan Park District and the Waukegan Historical Society. And if you have not visited us yet, we hope to see you soon. A prominent space in the Waukegan History Museum at the Carnegie is the Ray Bradbury Library. The room has been brought back to its original days as the children's reading room. This is the room where Ray fell in love with reading. Today, visitors see the space as it originally looked when the library opened in 1903. You feel Ray throughout, though, as the room houses and showcases his private and cherished book collection. When Ray passed away in 2012, he wanted a part of him to return to his hometown. His book collection was brought from his home in Los Angeles to Waukegan, and it was originally held by the Waukegan Public Library. Ray had always hoped that his collection would be at the Waukegan Carnegie, and once the project to restore the building became a reality, the Waukegan Public Library transferred the collection to the Waukegan Historical Society, and Ray's dream became a reality. The collection is over 2,000 wonderful books, some of which Ray acquired as a child growing up in Waukegan. Now, a favorite of mine in the collection is L. Frank Baum's The Sea Fairies. Baum, the author of the Oz books, were first checked out and read by Ray in the Waukegan Carnegie. He loved these books, and his family started to gift him his own copies for birthdays and for Christmas. When you open up The Sea Fairies from the Bradbury Collection, you find inside the front cover that this was a gift to Ray from his aunt and uncle for Christmas in 1930. Ray is 10 years old at this point, and you notice that the note to Ray from his family has the family's nickname for Ray, which was Shorty. Ray, though, also has his own bookplate, and you can see he writes Ray B in pencil on it. This book is just one example of the many treasures found in the collection. To fit with tonight's theme, though, I would say there were many surprises found while we did the inventory and curated the collection, but tonight I'm going to focus on one piece of the collection, the Architectural Digest 1981 Engagements, Daybook, and Calendar. And I'll pull a few surprises from within. Now, the year 1981, Ray and his wife Maggie and their daughters are living in Los Angeles. Ray, at this point in his career, was already considered one of the most accomplished and influential American writers of the 20th century, especially in the genre of fantasy and science fiction. Ray's days of growing up in Waukegan were long past by 1981, but there are still many connections to his hometown that can be found while digging through his daybook. I will pull out a few of these connections and some other highlights and surprises as well. Now, Bradbury used this daybook to keep track of his day-to-day activities and schedule. He has many meetings throughout the year. He is out and about at various speaking engagements as well, and he attends a good number of events and banquets. Scheduled activities with family and friends are in the daybook, as well as reminders like his daughter's birthdays. A look through this daybook really shows a youthful and whimsical approach to keeping track of things happening. Some may look through the pages of the daybook and see a chaotic mind, but really it is all just fitting for Ray Bradbury. As things change in his schedule, Ray often makes updates by gluing paper on top of the incorrect info and replacing it with new. Ray uses pens and markers of different colors, but predominantly they're black, reds, and different shades of blue. Now, an aspect of Bradbury that really doesn't get talked about much is his artistic skills. He was a good artist. Ray did enjoy painting and creating other visual arts, and throughout the daybook you find various doodles of faces like this. You can just envision Ray sitting at his desk, maybe talking to someone on the phone, and doodling away at one of these drawings. Now, this next doodle caught my attention as it is right underneath the words Dandelion Wine. Dandelion Wine is one of Bradbury's masterpieces, and it was published in 1957. In the novel, Bradbury himself steps back in time to when he was a 12-year-old boy in Waukegan. It is considered a semi-autobiography in which Bradbury uses real people, places, and events, all things that he experienced while growing up in Waukegan in the 1920s. In Dandelion Wine, Waukegan becomes Greentown. The novel Dandelion Wine was adapted into a stage production, and it has a run in 1981, and Bradbury puts in the dates of the opening and closing performances of the show. Dandelion Wine is Bradbury's work that he is most closely associated with in regards to Waukegan. He was very proud of the stage production, and he truly enjoyed people coming to celebrate the stories that he created from his childhood. Now, there are important, and you could also say famous people that pop up from time to time in Ray's daybook. By 1981, Bradbury is famous, and he in turn has famous friends and associates. Right away, as you thumb through the daybook, two recognizable names pop up in March. On March 6th, Bradbury attends Katharine Hepburn's play. In the book, he writes Kate Hepburn. 3 days later, Bradbury meets with his friend Saul Bass. Bass was a pioneer in filmmaking and graphic design in the 1980s, and Bradbury and Bass would collaborate a few years later on the short film titled Quest. The name, though, that really caught my attention, especially when looking for Waukegan connections, was on April 26th. Here, Bradbury wrote, "Call Gene Kelly." Yes, that Gene Kelly from Singin' in the Rain. Gene Kelly, aside from starring in the movie, also co-directed and choreographed Singin' in the Rain. The connection between Bradbury and Gene Kelly started with Bradbury's first major publication in 1950, which was The Martian Chronicles. It turned out that Ray and Gene Kelly shared a mutual friend. Ray and his wife were invited over to Gene Kelly's home so that the actor could share his love for The Martian Chronicles with Ray. After Kelly professed his love for the novel, Ray responded, "Gene, let me top that. You just made the greatest musical ever made, Singin' in the Rain. It is simply an incredible movie with a great screenplay, a great cast, and great numbers." Ray and his wife Maggie would continue to visit Gene Kelly, and their friendship would continue to grow. And one night, as they were walking back home, Ray said to his wife, "My God, I'd love to work with that man." Maggie responded, "Why don't you?" Ray decided that night to turn one of his short stories into a screenplay to present to Kelly. The short story Black Ferris was turned into Dark Carnival. Now, Gene Kelly loved the screenplay, Dark Carnival, and he tried to find money and a backer to make it into a movie. Ultimately, no support could be found, and Gene was very sorry to share the news with Ray. Ray was honored that Gene Kelly had even tried to get the movie made, though, in the first place. That screenplay, though, stuck with Ray, and it kept rummaging in his mind. 3 years later, Ray transformed the screenplay Dark Carnival into a novel. And just not any novel. The novel that he felt was his best and favorite that he ever wrote. Something Wicked This Way Comes. Something Wicked This Way Comes is very personal to Bradbury, and it is considered a dark fantasy novel. It contains elements of his childhood growing up in Waukegan that helped inspire him down his path as being a writer. The story is about two 13-year-old boys and their encounter with an evil and mysterious carnival that had arrived in Greentown, again Ray's name for Waukegan. Ray was inspired by a carnival visit to Waukegan on Labor Day weekend in 1932 when he was 12 years old. His family had just buried a beloved uncle, and Ray wandered down to the lakefront and into the carnival tent of Mr. Electrico. Here are Ray's words on that memorable encounter. I was 12 years old when Mr. Electrico arrived on Labor Day weekend, 1932. I sat in his electric chair to be electrocuted. Mr. Electrico dubbed me with his fiery sword until my hair rose and sparks jumped from my nostrils, and he cried, "Live forever." Next day, I ran back to the carnival grounds to find out just how to do that. Mr. Electrico introduced me to all the carnival freaks behind the scenes, including the hippo lady, the human skeleton, and the illustrated man. We sat on the beach and he listened to my grand ideas about my irresistible future. I wandered out of the carnival stunned and stood by the rushing horses of the carousel, listening to the calliope wheezing beautiful Ohio, and I wept. I knew that something amazing had struck me with electric fire and changed me forever. Within 8 weeks, I began to write. I wrote every day after that for the next 65 years. The other personal aspect of Ray's childhood that makes the pages of Something Wicked is the Waukegan Carnegie Library. There is a wonderful and frightening scene that takes place in the library. I'm not going to give it away, though, what happens. You're just going to have to read the book. Now, when Something Wicked This Way Comes gets published in 1962, Bradbury dedicates the novel to his friend, Gene Kelly. Now, back to the 1981 daybook. What Ray Bradbury and Gene Kelly talked about in this conversation, I don't know. I can guess, though, that Bradbury was sharing that their vision was soon going to be a reality. You see, on June 12th in the daybook, Bradbury writes, Peter Douglas, Disney. You see, the dream of Bradbury and Kelly to make the movie based on Dark Carnival was finally coming to fruition. In 1981, Walt Disney Productions acquired the rights to Something Wicked This Way Comes, and the wheels were in motion to turn it into a movie. I'm sure that Ray was calling Gene Kelly to share the good news. On September 29th, Bradbury writes in the daybook, start filming Something Wicked. During the filming, Bradbury has quite a few visits with Disney. Most are with Peter Douglas, who was the co-producer of the movie. Ray was actively involved in the project. He wrote the screenplay and was even consulted on the casting along with other aspects of the movie. The daybook, though, does not give the full story. And today we know that there were challenges that arose during production, and Ray and the director, Jack Clayton, did not always see eye to eye. But for Ray, 1981 was very much focused on the making of Something Wicked This Way Comes. And surely his mind was often reflecting on his childhood in Waukegan because of it. Ray, of course, was doing other things in his life in 1981 beyond working with Disney, though. For instance, Ray and Maggie go out to lunch at the Brown Derby on September 11th. His friends, Jan and Sid Stevel, take Ray out for dinner on his birthday. And Sid was also a writer. But it was Ray's notes for his plans on August 23rd through the 25th that caught my eye. He writes Mars, Saturn, Sagan, B. Murray. You see, from August 23rd to the 25th, the satellite Voyager 2 made its closest approach in historic flyby of Saturn. This allowed for wonderful views of Saturn's rings, moons, and atmosphere. Bradbury was clearly looking forward to this weekend. Bradbury had collaborated previously with Carl Sagan and Bruce Murray in 1971 in a panel session at a Caltech symposium. They had all discussed space exploration and humanity's future, and the book Mars and the Mind of Man resulted from this. Carl Sagan, famed astronomer and cosmologist, and Bruce C. Murray was a planetary geologist and educator, and also at the time director of NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, overseeing the operations of Voyager 2. On August 25th, Carl Sagan did a live television interview from NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory talking about his observations of the real-time mission of the historic flyby. Sticking to the space exploration theme, on November 12th, Bradbury writes 6:30, Apollo astronauts. It turns out that Bradbury was down in Houston, Texas in November 1981, doing speaking engagements as part of public outreach to inspire interest in space exploration. While in Houston, he goes to dinner with Apollo astronauts Jim Lovell, John Young, Richard Gordon, Pete Conrad, and all of their wives. Bradbury was friends with many of the Apollo astronauts. They were inspired by his writings, and Bradbury in turn was inspired by their missions. Now, to bring this back to a Waukegan connection, in 2019, on Bradbury's 99th birthday, and to start the countdown to the celebrations for his 100th, the sculpture Fantastic Traveler by Zachary Oxman was unveiled in front of the Waukegan Public Library. Astronaut Jim Lovell, most well known for the Apollo 13 mission, was a featured guest speaker at the event. It was truly an amazing and fun evening and community celebration of Ray. I had fun going back and looking at this picture again and reminiscing about that time. And we were talking about that was a lot of black fabric that was sewn together to cover that sculpture. We weren't able to cover Ray's arm holding his book, Fahrenheit 451. We actually put it on and then it rained. We had to pull it off and dry it in our theater. It was quite an ordeal, but it was really a lot of fun. And if you have not seen that wonderful sculpture of Ray, when you come and visit us in Waukegan at the Waukegan History Museum at the Carnegie, you should definitely stop by the Waukegan Public Library and say hi to him. And as our time together is coming to an end, we should take a peek at the end of the daybook. One of the final entries is on December 30th. And in there, Ray writes, Wicked, Wrap Party, University Sheridan at 8 p.m. I'd like to think that Ray, while celebrating this major accomplishment, spent a little time reflecting on the journey of Something Wicked This Way Comes becoming a movie. Did he think about the things that inspired him to become a writer? Those things that he put in the pages of Something Wicked? Maybe he remembered the memorable encounter with Mr. Electrico at the carnival. Maybe he thought about his love for reading and was transported back in his memories to his childhood library, the very room that I am in tonight. I know his heart was in Waukegan that night in 1981. Everyone, thank you for joining me this evening on this adventure through Ray Bradbury's 1981 daybook. I hope that you enjoyed the historical surprises that I pulled out for you. We hope to see you in the future at the Waukegan History Museum at the Carnegie. Right now, the team is working hard on turning the Ray Bradbury Library into an engaging exhibit space where visitors will be able to learn more about Ray's book collection, but they will also encounter his wonderful imagination. Thanks again, and it was an honor to be with you all for this year's Lake County History Symposium.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Ty. That was so fascinating, just seeing how these little personal messages tell a fuller picture and you connecting other research to his personal diary and knowing more of that fuller story really helps paint a picture of just 1 year of his life. So imagine what other stories that you can tell when we only just talked about 1981, that's
Right.
a lot that we could cover. So everyone's saying that they love the statue, they want to visit the statue, and such a wonderful presentation too. And does anything in Bradbury's book collection or the notes in his daybook provide new insights into the development of his political and philosophical views?
Really, yeah, they do. His collection really paints a real picture of the things that he loved, the things that really formed his different opinions on things. I mean, not to jump into political views or things like that, but as you walk around this room, you will realize, of course, that he loves space exploration. No shock there. But you'll also find, man, Ray Bradbury really liked dinosaurs. And he really liked cats. There are a lot of books on cats, for example. So it's a really neat way to look into the psyche of an author like this to see this cherished book collection. So we're really so excited to continue to curate this collection and find ways for our visitors to really be able to engage with it like he wanted.
Yeah, definitely. And that's kind of one of my questions. Part of this whole theme tonight is about research and experiencing more and finding out more. What are your next steps for some of these books and this process? Will it be digitized at all? Like, what are some more that you're planning on doing with this work?
Well, the entire inventory is, or the entire collection is inventoried. So along with that, we have made notes of when he puts in those personal things that, like I showed you with the sea fairies. And there are other books where he really sometimes uses this as a way to remember an aspect of his life. So he finds this book where he's traveling somewhere, whatever this book is, and he's been looking for it for a while. He puts sometimes who was with him when he bought this book, where he got it from, and other times important things in his life that had just happened. So they really capture his life. So we've been able to go through and pull all that together. Really, there's so many unique things that we are going to be doing within this room. I don't really want to give too much of it away, but we want our visitors to have the same type of encounter in the space like Ray had. When Ray sat in here, the room came alive. He could hear things happening in the books and smell and all this stuff. And we are very excited for what's going to be happening here in the very near future. We're looking at mid to late summer to have this new engaging experience within the space with his imagination and the collection.
Yeah, that'll be really exciting. And Nicole put in the chat the link to your website, and we'll put it in the chat again so people can follow you guys and look for upcoming events and things going on, like you said, this summer. Um, and what was I just going to comment on? Oh, and so you also are mentioning the importance of the power of place. And that really ties to what the historians were talking about last week, too, how local history is more than just books and documents, but really the sense of place, and that you can go and see and experience, and like you said, almost smell what Ray Bradbury smelled and be in that same setting, I think is really important to understanding local history too.
Yeah.
So someone commented on, and you can answer this one kind of quickly, but it's kind of interesting. What are you doing to archivally preserve these day books, or is there anything special that needs to be done with archival preservation?
Yeah, so through the inventory of the collection, we did a full assessment of each book. And knowing as we were entering into doing all this, we knew going in that we were going to find books that had some type of damage. Coming from Ray's house, some of these were in his basement, his office down there. There was a dirt floor, so we suspected there was going to be some mold and water damage, things like that. And we did find that a good portion of the collection did need conservation care. And we already have tackled that. We did the same process that the National Archives use, the Smithsonian, other places like that, where it's basically freeze drying these materials to kill off any of the bad stuff that we don't want on those books. So the collection has been conserved, cleaned, and it is all brought back together and whole again.
Right.
And we continue to monitor these. We will, of course, continue to do inventories to make sure everything is going well. And the archival process never ends.
Yeah, I was going to say that once you think it's, conserved, it still needs the care and the upkeep in a piece of collection. And that's why it's with you. So it can have that care and protection and be here for a long more time than it would have been. We have one more question about did Ray Bradbury and Jack Benny any cross paths? And with the Waukegan being the common connection between the two, is there anything that you've learned about them together?
Yeah, they did cross paths. Gosh, I'm blanking on, they were together for like a segment on a TV show. It was like two boys from Waukegan or something like that. We have, Ray's library here connected to it in the early days was the Barrison Theater, where young Benjamin Kubelski at the time was playing his violin in the pit orchestra. So we have Jack and Ray. We remember both of those our favorite sons here in the museum for sure.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ty. And Ty will be back on again at the end to answer some final questions. And then there's one other comment too, in case you missed this, Ty. But someone's suggesting maybe a summer movie night with Something Wicked This Way Comes at the museum. So that could maybe tie into some other fun things.
Disney Plus did just put Something Wicked This Way Comes on their streaming service, so it hadn't been on there until very recently. So you can jump into Disney's foray into the horror film genre. So
there you go. All right. Well, thank you, Ty. We are going to bring on our final presenter for the evening, my colleague, Diana Dretske. I'm just pulling up our stuff here. So our final presentation of the evening is Half Day, How a Town and Historic Building Lost Its Identity by Diana Dretske. Diana was born and raised in Waukegan, just like Ray Bradbury. There's your connection there. And she is a curator and Lake County historian for the Lake County Forest Preserve's Best Bauer Dunn Museum. For more than 35 years, she explored the history of Northeastern Illinois through primary research and publications, including The Bonds of War, A Story of Immigrants and Esprit de Corps in Company C, the 96th Illinois Volunteer Infantry, through Southern Illinois University Press. The Illinois State Historical Society recognized her work with a Lifetime Achievement Award for outstanding contributions in promoting, preserving, and commemorating Illinois history. So thank you, Diana, for being here tonight, and I can't wait to hear about your mysteries.
Thank you very much. So good evening, everyone. Half day. This is a fun one. This is something I've actually been interested in for many years. Why has Half Day, a small historic community, remained so pivotal in the telling of the county's history, even after it was swallowed by urban sprawl? Several elements made Half Day a place of importance, including native peoples, native trails and early roads, prairie land, and the county's first post office, first school, first sawmill, first non-native settler, and first mercantile store. Take that, other towns. When I began my career at the Dunn Museum, I became fascinated by stories of this community. It struck me that Half Day was strongly rooted in a time of change and transition. Today, though, Half Day exists only in the name of Half Day Road and Half Day School. There are myths and legends that still need to be explored and debunked. Analyzing past events through available data has allowed the history of Half Day to unfold more clearly over time as more records have become accessible and family histories and papers have been shared or donated to archives. So this regional map shows Half Day. Let's address the biggest misunderstanding. Why was the community named Half Day? Even today, people will tell you it's because it took half a day to get there from Chicago. You can see on the map, it is a fair distance from Chicago, so perhaps that was true at one point. But the community got its name in 1836 when it became the site of the county's first post office. And the post office was named Half Day for the Potawatomi chief Aptekissic, a Native American leader of great standing. Aptekissic's name was translated as Center of Sky, Sun at Meridian, or Half Day. And he was known to the settlers as Halfda or Half Day. In June 1833, Daniel Wright came to Lake County and he became the county's first permanent non-native settler. Aptekisic and the native tribe of Potawatomi helped Wright raise his first log cabin and helped him to plant crops. And Wright noted that the Potawatomi were kind to him in his troubles when the family was sick. So Aptekisic, a lot of those early settlers knew him, and then after the Treaty of Chicago was signed and ratified in 1835, he moved west. But he was definitely a key person in the region, and that is why it is called Half Day. This 1839 survey map shows Half Day area in Vernon Township with features that made it desirable to settlement. At the top of the image, you'll notice a little circle that says Timber, and that is the location of today's community of Long Grove. So that's a feature that surveyors would put so that people would know what areas had a lot of trees in them. Other features included the prairie landscape. The Des Plaines River was critical for early settlement. And many Native American trails were still there, and they intersected near what became Half Day. And then also the Chicago-Milwaukee Road, which was established in 1836, is shown running vertically on the west side of the Des Plaines River. So all of these factors really drew people to this location. So of the three local myths that I'm addressing this evening, this is the most recent one I've heard. One of local legends claims that Abraham Lincoln had a law office in Half Day. And I don't want you guys to spread this around as a rumor because it just wasn't the case. As exciting as it sounds, there's no historical documentation to substantiate this claim. Lincoln never mentions Half Day in his papers, letters, or even in his 3 autobiographies that he wrote, nor do any local newspapers document a law office there that he had. Lincoln's family home and his law practice was in Springfield, 200 miles away. And his one and only documented visit to Lake County was on April 2nd and 3rd, 1860, while he was attending sessions of the U.S. District Court in Chicago. Lincoln was invited to Waukegan by his friends Henry Blodgett and Alicia Ferry of Waukegan to come there and give a speech. And it was that evening during the speech at Dickinson Hall that it was interrupted, that there was a fire in a local warehouse, and everyone went down there to put out the fire, and so did Abraham Lincoln. Shown here is a portrayal of the event with the speech being interrupted and them going down to put out the fire. That was done by artist Lily Topo, and this is on the Lincoln statue in Waukegan at the county building. So it's really a beautiful commemoration of Lincoln to go see. So definitely, when you visit the Waukegan History Museum at the Carnegie, then you can stop by here and see the Lincoln statue as well. So I consider the 1980s to early 2000s to be when the final blow was dealt to the existence of Half Day. This is when the community lost its identity because of annexations and redevelopment. The story of the Half Day Inn is the most complicated story in the community's history, and I'm going to spend the bulk of my allotted time talking about this. In October 1987, Chris and Mark Kayat and Lou Tricoli purchased and renovated a historic building in Half Day, and this was located at the northwest corner of US Highway 45 and 21. They called it the Half Day Inn, and were told by locals it was built in 1843 by John Hurdle. The renovated building quickly became popular as a restaurant and bar. The owners tapped into the excitement about the building's history, and in September 1997, they put up a sign stating that it was the oldest standing structure in Lake County. However, there was another historic building in the county that was older, the Casper Ott Cabin in Deerfield, which was built in 1837. The Half Day Inn's claim of being the oldest quickly turned into a history kerfuffle. Tom Roth, at the time, was the historian for the Deerfield Area Historical Society, and he had learned of the inn's declaration and immediately disputed the claim by calling the Half Day Inn and speaking to a manager there, stating that the Casper Ott Cabin was the oldest standing structure in Lake County. The controversy made it into the news with an article in the Chicago Tribune. The article noted that the Half Day Inn's owners had no problem calling the Ott Cabin the county's oldest, but they specified that the Half Day Inn had been in the same place the longest. So, in the context of those two buildings, that was true. The Kayat Enterprises Half Day Inn was never moved, but the Ott Cabin had been moved from its original site to save it from being demolished for a new building for Baxter Laboratories. So it's splitting hairs here. Not long after that Ott Cabin Half Day Inn controversy hit the newspapers, I had the good fortune to meet Mrs. Helen Casey of Libertyville. This would be an important day because she raised a history red flag that I pursued for many years up till just recently in order to confirm her assertion that the Kayats building was not the original Half Day Inn. She knew this because her family had owned the Half Day Inn. So this was all new to me as a young historian. According to Mrs. Casey, the original inn was located 1/4 mile south of the Kayats Half Day Inn. So, as a good researcher, the first thing I did when I got back to the museum was to pull out the 1861 plat map. So this resource, I was able to confirm Mrs. Casey's assertion. And you can notice too, if you haven't used plat maps, they're great for showing property lines, owners, names, and buildings. Looking at this plat and census records, I determined that F. Hurdle, if you look in the red dot on the map, operated a hotel and tavern at this location. You may remember that the other half-day inn was saying that Hurdle's built that. So here's Hurdle. And this is 1/4 mile south of the Kyatt family's half-day inn, which is near the site of Hubbard's Mercantile on the 1861 plat. So the yellow rectangle above that. So you can see these are in two different locations. One half-day inn and another half-day inn, two different locations. In pursuit of Mrs. Casey's half-day inn, I located this photograph taken in 1935 as part of the Historic American Building Survey. The building was identified as Tavern Half-Day, Illinois. It is at the location shown on the 1861 plat. The red dot on the map here, a current day map, shows the location of the historic building in the photograph, and the yellow X marks the Kyatt's half-day inn. Again, they're not in the same place. You can see from this there are two buildings claiming to be the original half-day inn. Research into land records at the Lake County Recorder of Deeds actually gave me way more information on this. My research volunteer helped me with this, and we created a paper trail of the property owners. So I've listed a selection of it here. We have pages and pages of owners over 100 years. So I just picked out a few. Silas Stevens owned the property and built the hotel in 1843. And then we see the familiar name of Hurdle. By 1856, Fred Hurdle owns the property and he's operating the hotel and tavern there. And finally, we see Myron Moore Sr. purchasing the property in 1885, and he operates it as a mercantile store and a hall, so that he had the upper floor used as a dance hall. And then later in 1898, he became the postmaster for Half Day, and the post office was in this building until 1916. So a lot was going on there. And Myron Moore had moved from Diamond Lake to Half Day, where he purchased the inn. And so he made the renovations to turn it into a mercantile store and dance hall. And this is a clipping from February 1886. Announcing that there would be a band playing at Moore's Hall and there'd be dancing and oyster supper. So that sounds like a lovely evening for everyone there. And this was also his family's home. So this one building had all of this going on. The story of the original Half-Day Inn remained elusive and difficult to find the full story about. Last year, I took another deep dive into local newspapers, and I found an article on Ernestina Moore that connected more of this story together. She was known to the half-day community as Gammy, and the Vernon Town Crier newspaper reported that for her 94th birthday in 1964, the community was invited to come into her home, the Old Half-Day Inn, and the paper even called it that. Ernestina Marie Rutzen was born in Germany, and she immigrated with her parents and sisters to Lake County, Illinois in 1873. In 1888, she married Myron Moore Jr., and that was his father, who owned the Half-Day Inn building. Ernestina and her husband moved to Chicago, where Myron worked as a streetcar driver. But during the summers, Ernestina would come back to Half-Day with their daughter and spend the summer there in the Half-Day Inn, looking after her elderly in-laws, but also enjoying the country life. In 1892, Ernestiner's father-in-law, Myron Morse Sr., sold the inn and the property to her. So that's really interesting. He doesn't sell it to his son. He sells it to her. So obviously they had a really great connection, and he could see that she cared for the property. And maybe he was a little estranged from his son too, we can suppose. Also, diving into Ernestina's genealogy answered my niggling question about how Mrs. Helen Casey was exactly connected to the Half Day Inn, somehow related. Well, it turns out that Helen Casey was married to Ernestina Moore's nephew, Burnell Casey. So Helen would have visited this historic building many times in her life. So this is a picture again of Lila, her daughter, with her mother Ernestina celebrating her 94th birthday and inviting people to come into their home. And that's the doorway into the Half Day Inn building. So Mrs. Casey had also told me that the Half Day Inn had burned down. And I hadn't found any information about this. So I finally found a newspaper article about this tragedy in the Vernon Town Crier. And that newspaper, it's not online, and I didn't have access to it until it was, several bound volumes were donated to the Dunn Museum. The year before the Half Day Inn was destroyed by fire, the Lake County Historical Society had been concerned with its preservation and was trying to find a way to save it. Ernestina Moore had a covenant with the Highway Department granting her a life interest in the property. However, if there was a change in ownership, the house would have to be moved in order to conform with the newly established setback lines on the highway. Thankfully, Ernestina Moore had sold the property a few months before the fire, but still it was a terrible loss for the community. With the knowledge that the original Half Day Inn had been destroyed by fire in 1964, it makes sense now that as the years passed, people forgot about it and forgot about the building. Remember, this is a very small community to begin with, and by the 1970s, there were maybe a few dozen people living there. And as new developments came in, new people moved into the community and they didn't know the history, or they didn't know the old building and wouldn't even know to ask about it. So when the Kayat brothers bought the historic building at the northwest corner of 45 and 21, so a quarter mile north of the old Half Day Inn, they were told these stories, this history, but those stories were actually those from the original Half Day Inn, 1/4 mile south. So essentially what happened was most everything that was true about the old historic Half Day Inn, a 1/4 mile south, was being transferred to the newly opened Half Day Inn. It is really interesting, and this is why it's been so confusing to sort this out and for people to even know how to doubt it or how to figure it out for themselves. So the history remained much the same, but was superimposed on the wrong building. I guess that's one way of putting it. There was nothing deceptive about that. It's just what happens when history is lost. The Kayat brothers didn't know the history community. They weren't from here. They were from the Zion Winthrop Harbor area. Locals are telling them these stories and they're like, great, we've got this old building. These stories are fantastic. This is an important building. We'll restore it and reopen it. So they had no idea. By searching newspapers online and utilizing the Recorder of Deeds and plat maps to trace the property's ownership, I was able to determine that the Kayats building was actually originally constructed in 1897 by the Foote brothers. It was called the Half Day Clubhouse at that time. And here's the announcement that was put into the Lake County Independent about the opening evening for the grand ball at the Half Day Clubhouse. So a little bit different from being built in 1843. This building is from 1897. And here's a few postcard views to give you a sense of the Kayat Half Day Inn building through the years. The biggest change, really, if you look at the bottom image, is that when they did the redevelopment renovations in 1987, the windows were enlarged. So if you look at the top views earlier of that building, it had the porch and the windows are narrower, and then later the porch is removed and the windows are widened. So that's one of the biggest changes anyways. So really, really cool building at that corner. So unfortunately, the Foote Brothers building, which in 1987 became known as the Half Day Inn, got in the way of Vernon Hills expansion and development. In 1996, Vernon Hills and Lincolnshire squabbled over the hamlet of Half Day for their development plans. So Half Day was really tiny. I would say maybe 20, 30 acres in size and not very many people living there. Ultimately, Vernon Hills won in a court case and was able to annex what was left of Half Day. No one was happy about the Kayats Half Day Inn being torn down and losing another historic building. Even when it was demolished, though, locals still believe that that was the oldest building in the county. It's hard to break habits. So here are the photos of the two buildings side by side. The original Half Day Inn, built in 1843 by Silas Stevens, and the Kayats Half Day Inn, built in 1897 by the Foote Brothers. Had the old Half Day Inn been still standing, the confusion may not have happened. But even with the 1987 building taking on the Half Day Inn's identity, it did keep that story and interest in local history alive. And so that's not a bad thing. But now that we know the true identities of these buildings, we have an even bigger story that we can tell. Thank you. Hopefully, you can see now what happened with that big mystery. And honestly, I'm happy because I spent a lot of years trying to figure it out myself.
All right, thank you, Diana. So again, feel free to put questions into the chat or the Q&A, and I will start going through those. So interesting to keep those two buildings in mind, and I can totally see how the local story kind of meshed them together and transferred stories from one place to the other. It's just so common, and I think that's also what's really interesting about local history are how those myths and legends change and develop over time. And but you took the time to really dive into that research. So can you share a little bit about tips or suggestions on research in case people want to like look into this? Any like good people who want to be historians?
Yeah. Well, first of all, listen to your elders. Because really, I mean, I knew about the Kayats Half Day and I thought that was as old as they said it was. And then when I met Mrs. Casey and she said that, then I went into research mode to try to understand and prove or disprove what she was saying. But really a great place to start is always your local museum or historical society. A lot of them have plat maps available. There's also a lot of plat maps available online, which was very helpful. Doing research into land records is harder and trickier. So you might want to ask if anyone at a local historic society or museum has done that before and how to go about that. But those are now also available online. So when I was starting this research, most records were not online at that point. As you said with my introduction, I've been around for a few decades. So I've seen a lot of progress with access. So really the best recommendation is to talk to your local historical society or museum.
Yeah, great place to start.
Mhm.
And we did put a link in the chat for plat maps. Nicole's putting
Right.
it in the chat again, so you can see those online. And then this came up at the first week of the History Symposium. and you had a lot of clips from newspapers, and your local
Yes.
library or your local historical society may have a subscription to newspapers.com. So that's just another really good place to start, newspapers.com and ancestry.com too, if you're doing some genealogy work.
Definitely.
Okay, so here is a question. Was Lila related to the shopping dynasty of the Nordstroms?
Oh, no, I didn't find any connection on that. Yeah. This was a local guy from the Chicago area that she married.
So what year was the creamery built that became the inn number 2?
That was early before, quite early, maybe 1850s. Yeah, so that was there. There were several other buildings there before the Foote brothers built this 1897 half-day inn. It may or may not have been part of the foundation for the new building, newer building. But yeah, there was a creamery there.
Here is a question too. Did they do any forensic dating of building elements in the Foote building, so half day inn number 2? Was there any architectural styles like balloon framing or anything that helped date it post Civil War, not 1840s?
The only thing that I saw was their comments in newspaper articles, the Kyatt brothers, and it was more the local people telling them it was old. And they didn't really know. They said, well, we've been down in the basement and it looks old, but they didn't understand that. And they didn't do any sort of architectural historic investigation. They were just happy to have something of interest and restore it and get it open and promote it as the oldest standing structure in Lake County, which it was not, but that's okay. It still got,
People
as I
love those
said, it's
little marketing things, right?
exactly, and it's still got people excited about local history, so I'm all for that.
Yes. Someone has asked too, are there any other original buildings or homes remaining in that half-day area? Or was
Unfortunately,
the
not even there was the church, which was older than the half day inn, the Kayats half day inn, but that's now gone. There's no old houses anymore. I would say the oldest thing is the half day cemetery.
Um, and someone else had a question about, and I'm not quite sure what they mean, but what about the sulfur smell of the water?
I don't know about the water
Yeah,
there.
okay. I wasn't sure either, but um, okay. And then one other question as I'm kind of just going through these that came to the top of my head. You started the presentation talking about half day as Aptakisic, as a native person. Um, this was just one part of a research in this one area. Do you think there could be other misconceptions or other misinformation that dates back to maybe original people, the first peoples, the native peoples on this land, or, because this is just such a unique case where this name became named after a native person that was here first. Do you think there might be other cases like that in the area, in the county, that might just not be known to us?
It's possible, and there is another community called Aptakisic between Buffalo Grove and Lincolnshire, so that's named for him as well. Um, it's it's very interesting that all of that took place when he was still alive and in the area. That half day was named after him, and the post office was named after him. Because from what I've been reading, he didn't leave until 1836 or 37, Chief Aptakisic I'm talking
Yeah.
about. So I think that in itself is pretty unique, that
Yeah.
the settlers had such a great relationship with the native peoples, and especially with Chief Aptakisic, that they wanted to honor him.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very neat.
Mhm.
Um, I'm not sure if you know this one, but someone's asking, is the Kaya Enterprises that own several restaurants today, like the Lake House and Lake Villa, is that part of the same family?
That's them. That is the
Oh, that's
same
him.
family. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they've done
Wow.
well.
Yeah. That is really incredible.
Yes.
Um, Someone else is mentioning that there's next to Washburn Congregationalist Church on Old Half Day Road is an annex that is also a very old building.
Okay.
If someone else wants to look at other
Yeah.
buildings in that area.
Great.
One other question I think I'm just seeing for Diana. The Chicagoland Airport was located just south of the Half Day Inn. Do you know when that opened and when it closed as well?
Not
Or
off the top of my head. We do have information about it at the Dunn Museum. If you want to contact me, oh, let me put up my email address.
Ooh, next slide.
Yeah. So I love to get emails from people curious about local history. So please do that and I can help you out with that.
Yeah, that's an interesting question to think about, maybe how
Yeah.
that could have impacted Half Day Inn or that area's growth and development if when the airport was opened and closed.
Yes.
And since this is also up here, Diana has a fantastic blog that you can have search any kind of topic that you might be interested in. It has a great search function, and I use it all the time when I'm trying to do research for programs and stuff. So if you're interested in this local history, definitely check out her blog. It might have some answers that you didn't even know about. Oh, someone said the airport was built in 1948 and closed 1978. So, all right.
I have some upcoming presentations as well.
Yes.
You want to see me? I'll be out and about.
So while you're looking at these other upcoming dates, and if you're into this mysteries on history and research and surprises and looking at archival materials, the Diana's book, The Bonds of War, is another great example of this historical surprises and really diving deep into historical research and how this um, how history is a science and ever changing, and just because we know so much about the Civil War doesn't mean that there's nothing new to learn about it today, and we're still learning and uncovering new facts and details and untold stories, and this book I think really covers that as well. um, all right, so let's bring on all our final presenters. So again, if you have any final question and answers for any of the presenters, please put them in the Q&A. Please put them in the chat. And I will just start off with a question to all my presenters, since this is a theme and a topic that we're talking about not only at the symposium this year, but just in general this whole year as we're celebrating the 250th. But what does local history mean to you? Why does it matter? And why should we continue sharing our research on local history?
Well, I'll just start. I feel like this is our community, right? Where you live. And the more you know about your story, the story of the people that came before you, the more you feel connected to it. And the more we can build a stronger community. It's those shared stories. I like to liken it to maybe more ancient times when we would all sit around a campfire and you would have a storyteller come in and share stories. I feel like that's what history is about, is sharing stories and creating that bond of community through stories.
Yeah, I really like the community aspect, and that was highlighted last week as well. Anyone else want to jump in on that?
Local history is history. All history is local history on some level. It's just a matter of where. So I think it's no less or more than any elite or bigger ideas. It's all part pieces of the same historical mosaic that we're celebrating this year. We're celebrating the signing of the most important social contract probably ever on 250. So yeah, and we are all part of that social contract.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it'll be fun to really see how all the historical societies in Lake County celebrate the 250th. And we're all going to be amazed at these wonderful connections that we have to that grander story. But we have so many local history things that happen that were important for that 250th. So it'll be fun to see it all kind of come together with the plans of the local historical societies and the Lake County Historical Alliance.
Yeah, is there anyone else that wants to comment on the 250th and the signing of the Declaration of Independence and what we should be doing to commemorating the upcoming year?
I've been waiting for 50 years for this. Because the last time it was 1976, I was still in high school. My mother spent the entire day watching events on TV, and I said, well, I have to say I didn't plan to be on the Historical Society. I didn't plan to do a lot of things that I ended up doing, but I'm looking forward to it. I mean, cakewalks and people there. It's been suggested now on the 8th of July that at 5 p.m. Central Time and wherever you happen to be is to read the Declaration of Independence. Bring people together because apparently that was the first time it was actually read in public. Before then it was the piece of paper signed off and moved on. And yeah, we're in Highland Park. We are looking forward to it, or at least I am.
Anyone want to add, like, why in Lake County, Illinois, should we still be celebrating and commemorating this event too? So
You're an
often you think about
American.
just
You,
you're
you're
American,
an
yeah.
American. You're an American. That's the whole reason for doing it. You don't need to live on the Northeast to be the exclusive provenance. You just get out there and celebrate that you have a great country there and that you have freedoms that other people wish they had.
I want to go
So,
back to what I said previously. So the Declaration of Independence is a social contract, so we hold these truths, and all of us live under the hope that we can maintain this, and we want to recognize this important document that we still hold 250 years later to lead us with the principles that are that are described in it.
Mhm. One other aspect of this theme that we've been highlighting is the importance of active research and conducting research, and that history is a science and ever changing. And I think we've been talking about that a lot too, right? How important it is to verify and conduct and look at your sources and find out all the information that you need to. Any other comments on your research or what you kind of did behind the scenes to find this work out? The presentations last week, some people had some really fascinating questions on how they uncovered this information. So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts about research.
There's always one more piece of the puzzle. And that's why his stories are always changing, as what we kind of trends that evolve through the larger historical community and local history. We kind of change how we look at lens, what people we look at, what they did, activities, and these are always going to evolve. And every time that's done, we bring more pieces of the puzzle and learn more and create a clearer picture and again create more questions. So it is ongoing. But we answer questions
Yeah.
too that bring us answers in the end.
Yeah, I think you highlighted something that is always on my mind when I'm doing this is the questions. Like you said, there's always one more question, and that just can keep on spiraling you down and down and down because you always just think of one more question.
And also, in addition to the questions, is the reflection of what information you're accumulating. And sometimes I find that because I do the squirrel method where I get as much as I can from newspapers and maps and deeds and all that kind of thing. And then I start sorting through it. And sometimes you just have to stop and absorb it
Mm.
and try to look at it differently. Like, what am I missing here? What haven't I noticed yet? What are the connections? So, yeah, you have to sometimes give yourself a little step back space
Mhm.
and reflect on it a little bit more.
Yeah, and Ty, I think your presentation did a great job of that reflection piece, is that you could have just said, look at all these dates and what he did, but putting it into that larger context really helped make the story more complete.
Thank you.
So, just one final question, and I'll see if anyone else has it. But from me, you know, we heard 5 different stories of local history and people uncovering something new in their local communities. Was there something that you guys as presenters learned tonight? Was there anything that surprised you that stood out from these presentations? If you didn't watch last week's, that's okay too. But what was something that kind of surprised you?
I think one thing for me with Ty, you reading Ray's daily diary, it was so personal, and to see this emphatic handwriting and then the doodles, and it was just a really different glimpse into him. I mean, already respected him as a great writer and the imagination, but you're seeing it really more tactile on the page. That was a huge surprise for me. That was really
Mhm.
cool.
Makes them more personable, right? Like real.
Well, I always think it's fun to see what everybody else is doing, what they're focused on. We all really get focused on our own local history, stories, and research, and we don't always get to branch into other things. So it's always really neat to hear what Diana and Kathy, Nancy, and others are digging into. And
Mhm.
when we get together, we have these wonderful stories to share, or we're talking about the commemorating, or we're just commiserating with each other on roadblocks that we run into. It's always always a pleasure to see what the local historians are doing.
I
Yeah.
agree with Ty. It's always a pleasure. It's like Diana, I've been doing this for a really, really long time. It's hard to surprise me, but it's always interesting, and it always fills in one more piece.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great plug for, and we'll end on this note on the Historical Alliance and be on the lookout for all these members. There's links on the program to not only the presenters, but links to all the Lake County Historical Alliance members and where you can find out their work, and be on the lookout for, again, this upcoming year, the 250th. Lots of your local historians and societies and museums are doing work to celebrate this upcoming year. So please be on the lookout for that. And we hope to see you next year in 1 year for the 12th annual History Symposium. So be on the lookout for information there. Thank you, everyone, for great presentations over these last 2 nights. Again, these are recorded, so we will be sending out the links later. And we hope you enjoyed your evening with us. All right. Thank you, everyone. Take care.